to explain the concepts very well. So my journey of last 8 weeks has been like fantabulous, to keep it precise. Yeah.
What's one new thing you learned?
So one, there are a lot of new things. So one new thing, if I have to say, like I learned to approach product in a very structured manner.
Okay. And could you elaborate? What do you mean by, like, what is the difference between how you used to approach product earlier versus now? When you say structured, could you help me understand that a little better?
Okay, I'll just give you a brief example. So even taking example from my current experience in itself, right? So we used to build for users. So a lot of things go into what users need, and we used to directly talk to users and come up with ideas and come up with solutions, identify the problem and solutions. But then in Nextleap, after interacting with you, Arindam, so one thing what I've learned was that to always prioritize an outcome more than anything, right? User needs are very important, but then it should align with the business goals, business outcomes. So business needs and customer user needs to marry each other before identifying a problem and coming up a solution with it.
Got it. Can you tell me a little bit more about your current role, your SCM, product and design at Udaan? So specifically, what does your role look like on a day-to-day basis?
So on a day-to-day basis, like I specifically spend my time more on supply chain vertical, where I problem solve various facets of supply chain, increase the efficiency, and improve the overall design and process through building products in order to achieve the same.
Okay, so that's sort of like an overarching description of your role. But on a day-to-day basis, what does a day in your life look like?
Okay, if I have to say like very specifically, my mornings go with couple of stand-up meetings and checking up the matrices, how we are doing on a day-to-day level at business and product front both. Then in the second half, mostly I look into the problems in hand. I see like what can be done, and yeah, so second half is mostly on the problem solving front, doing some analysis or getting some help from the analytics team to check out some analytics. Then again, I close the day with some couple of calls. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So Kaushik, tell me about your favorite hobby. What do you like to do outside of work?
Okay, so my favorite hobby is that I am very passionate about football. So I generally keep following football on a daily basis. So as of currently, like, yeah, football is the one thing I'm engaging very much outside the work. Previously, I used to go out, play a lot, badminton. I used to do cycling and stuff. But as of now, current pastime is to follow football and watch football.
Watch football. Okay. What leagues and what teams do you follow?
So I mostly follow Premier League on a week-to-week level, and I am an ardent fan of Arsenal.
Arsenal. So you must be happy this year then.
Yeah.
What do you think changed between how Arsenal was doing last 3, 4, 5 years and this year? What are they doing differently that has led to better outcomes this year?
Okay, so one thing what I felt was that they stuck with their coach. So they bought in Mikel and they stuck with this philosophy. They gave him some time to rebuild the squad. So last couple of years, it was more about the rebuilding the squad, like removing the non-performing players or the players who are not suited to the philosophy of the club, bringing in the new players whom the coach trusts, right? So that happened, and also changing the how Arsenal plays. Like last 3-4 years, they used to play very soft football. Now they have become more like a hard pressing football they're playing. So yeah, I think two things which has changed a lot in the way Arsenal plays, that the players whom they have shipped out and they have bought in, and the way how they approach the game has changed.
Okay, you mentioned philosophy a couple of times. If you were to articulate Arsenal's philosophy to a fan of another football club, how would you articulate that philosophy?
Okay, so they stick to their coach.
Okay.
They back heavily on their coach. Even if the outcome takes a couple of years, they're okay to wait for it. Uh, they don't seek the outcome immediately, but then they want it to be a organic. Uh, they wait for their coach's approach, and they rely heavily on their coach's philosophy and coach's approach. And the
Okay.
second thing is that they cultivate players from the grassroots, and they try to incorporate them into their style of playing. So yeah,
Got
this
it.
would be it.
Okay. On the technical side of how Arsenal play, what formation do they typically play? And does it change when they're playing different opponents?
Not really. So I think they're envisioning to transition into 4-3-3 formation, but as of now they play either 4-2-3-1 or 4-1-4-1.
Okay. How do you think the dynamic of a game changes? Let's say your team, which is Arsenal, plays a 4-3-3, and if they were playing against a team which is 4-4-2 versus, let's say, 5-4-1, how do you think the dynamic of the game changes?
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned about the other formation, so it really depends upon the who's your opposition and analyzing what are their strengths, and how do you mix match within your team to counter their strength and come out successful. So I think, yeah, if it's a heavy defense team, they might start with a 4-4-2, having a strong midfield and strong striker. And if it's like a 4-2-3-1 kind of a team, they might end up playing 4-3-3. Yeah, it boils down to the strategy of who your opposition is and how they play and their weakness and strengths.
Okay. So one last question about football before we move on.
Sure.
Let's say you're Mikel Arteta and you've also done product management, right?
Okay.
You've set up a position of 4-3-3,
Okay.
and you want to measure whether your players are actually, depending on where the ball is and what the opponents are doing, as a coach, you want to measure whether your players are in the right position or not.
Okay.
Let's say that's your objective. Is the objective clear?
Sure. I'll just rephrase it. So I want to basically know that where my players are positioned maximum. Is my understanding right?
Not maximum. At a given instant of time, you want to know how far your players are with respect to the ideal position that you had in mind.
Got it. Yeah.
Let's say that was your objective. Now, let's say that you want to give your striker or give your central defender a scorecard at the end of the day. What are like a couple of metrics that you would frame for them?
Got it. So let's say like for strikers, the immediate metric what I could think of is that the role of a striker is to score goals. So that's the definition of the role of the striker. So having said that, the top 3 metrics would be like the number of chances he has created.
No, but hold on. That's not your objective. Your objective is to measure how far the striker is from the ideal position. So that's your objective. So let's not.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, I'll just take a minute. Like,
sure.
I'll think through about it. Yeah. So given the position, given the fact that I have to track the right position of the player at any given point of time, so I'll break the scenarios into like 2-3 different types. One is a free flowing type, and one is the second type would be more of a corner or a free kick position.
Okay.
And the third would be like counter pressing type.
Okay. So based on possession or outside play, okay, followed so far. And then what would the metric be that you use to measure the positional accuracy?
Okay, so I'll just take a minute.
Sure.
So there are like so at each scenarios, at an ideal level, there is a position attributed to each player. So
Okay.
I would probably like count the number of times the player has deviated from that position. So that would be the first metric what I would like look into it.
And how would you measure deviation?
A deviation, I'm currently like I'm not able to recollect, but then there are like multiple statistical analysis which one could do.
Got it. Okay. So let's move on.
Sure.
We'll go to the assignment that you submitted, which was about Tripadvisor.
Got it.
Just so that the audience can also follow along, I'll
Sure.
keep your assignment on the screen and you can open it as well at your end.
Sure.
So the problem statement that you picked, and this is also relevant because, as you might know, we're trying to do a travel startup of our own, and that's what this role is for. So if you could just briefly walk through what the problem statement was for Tripadvisor that you were trying to solve for.
Okay, so the problem statement was to increase the number of reviews on the platform, increase the number of user-generated reviews on the platform.
Okay.
That was the broad level problem statement.
Okay. And how many reviews does Tripadvisor have right now?
So right now, they have like more than a billion user reviews and ratings as per their website.
Okay. So my first question is, if they already have a billion user reviews, why is it important to increase reviews?
So reviews, the main point of increasing the user reviews is that it kind of builds the trust on the customers who are visiting the platform. And I personally feel that reviews kind of overperform increase your sales rather than going for a discounting or couponing, etc. So though there are like billion reviews, but still there are like a bunch of competitors in the international market and the domestic market as well. So the competition is still huge, and the travel market is also like immensely huge at the current scenario. So given the space where TripAdvisor is, so I think the user reviews are still more like important for them. Yeah.
Okay. So you have some interesting survey responses. So 45 survey responses and 75% said that users look at the reviews and ratings. Before we get into what the users are saying, how many respondents actually said that they were interested? Because you're getting a number 75%, right?
Okay.
So do you remember the raw numbers? Because there seems to be something like, if you look at this section of the slide, primary research, right?
Okay.
What do you think is off between the 75%, 10%, 70%, 33 and this number? Do you think there is anything off in this section of the slide?
Just give me a minute. Let me.
Sure. Maybe you can look at your raw data as well.
Yes, I'll do that.
Maybe something for the audience to think about as well, like what is off in the primary research section. Okay, did you find anything off, or we can move on?
I think we can move on. Like I'm not able to immediately find something way off, but then yeah, I would be happy to take if you could let me know like what you found off.
So let's talk about the reviews question in a little bit more depth. So TripAdvisor already has a billion user reviews,
Right.
and the problem that you're trying to solve is create more reviews. So if they already have a billion user reviews, I get that, reviews help users make the decision and choose, one of the trips. But if they already have a billion user reviews, why do you need more reviews?
Okay, so one of the aspect what I think is that how they have like a lot of reviews. So quantitatively, they have huge number of reviews. The question to think of here is that how many reviews are qualitative, like how many reviews are of really good quality, or how many reviews are like helping the users who are visiting on the site. So I think the number of qualitative reviews would still be a question.
Got it. So it's the quality of reviews is what you're trying to tackle.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. We'll move on to the solution that you had. So of the three solutions that you had, you mentioned that the ViewBot solution is what you would go with based on the framework that you have here. Could you just talk about what the ViewBot solution is for 30 seconds?
Sure. So the ViewBot solution is nothing but an AI chatbot in the Tripadvisor. So basically, the bot asks few questions like, what was the what do you want to review? The user don't even has to type. He just has to tap on the options which is shared by the bot. So from there, it just builds up the flow of the chat. So here, the essence is that the user doesn't even have to type anything, but rather just choose. So let's say like if I'm the user and I'm interacting with the bot, and the bot asks me like what do I have to review? So I say I just tap on hotel. So the bot collects like the recent search of my hotels in the platform, and it asks like, is it one of the hotel? Did you visit any of these hotel? So I choose a hotel where I had visited. Then it asks follow-up questions like, how was the stay? How was the service? How was the food? Like follow-up questions like that. And it also gives me an option. So I keep going and giving one word answers by tapping an option which the bot gives me. So then what happens is that the bot crafts a review on behalf of me and asks my approval to post it. So once I tap on yes, so the bot posts the review on behalf of the user.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about one aspect of this bot feature. My assumption is, and you can disagree and tell me if I'm wrong, is that you would not show this bot to every user on the website, because maybe there's a user who's not even done a trip in the last 3 months, as an example.
Right.
So the logic for which user to show the bot prompt to, what are some inputs that you would use in order to determine, when to show or who to show the bot prompt to versus who to not show the bot prompt to?
Okay. I would probably not show a user who's like visiting for a first time.
Okay.
For the very first time on the platform. And I will show the bot to the users who are like repeat visitors on the platform, considering that they have some previous travel or restaurant searches on the platform.
Okay. What are some challenges with showing it to all previous visitors?
Okay, so when I was making the solution, I went ahead with an assumption to show this to every user who's coming up to the platform. Right.
Okay. And what are some challenges with showing it to every user?
One thing is that they might not be able to identify the feature or recognize the feature in the first go if they are like the first time users, and the feature might not even be checked.
Okay.
And the second thing is that even if they end up coming to the bot, it might not be very relevant to them. So I essentially don't want to show something which is not relevant to my users, So
Okay.
the users who are like coming to the platform on the first time, who are like new to this category, right? So they might, in the first go, they might not be very used to this feature. So it will still be something like very irrelevant to them. I don't want to essentially show something irrelevant to my users.
Okay. Let's talk about the final review, right? That the bot is generating. There are two options. So in your implementation, you have asked, can I post this on your behalf? Yes or no? Now, let's say the user taps no. At that point of time, you can give the user an option to edit, or you can re-trigger the bot flow, right? These are two options. You can come up with more options as well, but let's stick to these two options. If you had to make a decision on whether you would re-trigger the bot flow or whether you would create like an edit flow on the text itself, on what basis would you make that decision?
Okay. So re-triggering. Okay. So probably I'll add like one more. I'll just take a minute.
Sure.
Sure. So what I thought about is that so if the user has already given reviews before using any view bot, so I'd probably give him an edit option. And the trigger option is something I would not prefer because it makes the user to go through the entire thing from the beginning. But rather, what I would think of is that take more information from the user and craft much more detailed review. But having said that, if I have to go to the trigger first, probably like I would ask to a user who's like posting his or her first review.
Got it. So you're leaning towards like a text edit rather than re-triggering.
Correct.
Okay. Let's look at the final slide that you had, which this was a really nice slide because you had called out what pitfalls and how you would mitigate the pitfalls. You've mentioned three things here. Can you think of any other pitfalls? Let's say you go ahead and launch this. Can you think of any other pitfalls outside of these three?
Okay. I'll just take 45 seconds to a minute time.
Sure.
So the other pitfall, what I could think of is on the bot latency side.
Okay.
That is one. And yeah, I would probably like go deep into the kind of reviews which the bot has been sharing. So though I have called it out, but I think that point could be like explored more.
Okay. So good points. How would you mitigate the risk of bot having high latency?
More like so that I would approach that on the system design side.
Okay. So you would look at the system design, and in what way would you change the system design?
So Yeah, so I would so I won't go into the details of it, but then let's say like there are various aspects of system design, like load balancer and load. I'm sorry, I'm not able to recollect the system design
No
names
worries.
of the components. Yeah,
No worries. So let's talk about the bot reviews. And as you mentioned right at the beginning, it is
but
the quality of reviews that seems to be a problem rather than the quantity of reviews.
right.
So after you launch this feature, how would you measure if the quality of reviews has actually improved or not?
Okay, so I would go back and see the text quantity, the quantity of words in a review, right?
Okay.
So first way of associating a bad review is that if the review is like not detailed. So I would see like I would have a threshold, like I would define a good review should contain so and so words and should express so and so emotion.
Okay.
So I would probably like measure these words and emotions to check the goodness of a review.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Can you tell me about a product that, like, what's your most used, frequently used product?
Okay. I generally like use more of grocery apps. So
Okay.
I've been like using Super Daily, like off late for like last 3-4 months. It's been like super useful.
Super Daily. Okay. And what's your favorite feature on the Super Daily app?
Subscription model. So I just have to like subscribe my milk and my bread necessity. So until there's a subscription, the milk keeps coming to my doorstep every day. I don't have to like worry about them.
Okay. Okay. So in this feature,
Mhm.
if you had to improve something, what would you improve?
You mean the subscription model, which I said?
Yeah. Yeah. The not the subscription model because that's fairly broad, but
Okay.
this entire feature from, choosing milk and bread to milk and bread magically showing up at your doorstep every morning. This part of the journey, if you had to improve anything, what would it be?
Got it. So one of the pain point what I'm facing here is that though all the from placing an order to delivery seems to be like hassle free. So what happens is that I get my delivery mostly somewhere around like 3:30, 3 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, right? So I being like an early riser myself, but I still wake up at somewhere at 6:30. So there is a good 3 hour time window where my milk stays outside my door, right?
Okay.
There's a chances of it getting like spoiled. So if I have to like so the promise what Super Daily offers is that they will deliver it to your doorstep before 7.
Okay.
But from a user point of view, I would rather feel like getting it closer to like 6:30 than uh, delivering it much earlier. So delivering it much earlier is also causing some trouble to me.
Okay. So given okay, so you want to basically um get it as close to 6:30 as possible.
Correct. Yes.
And would you solve this problem? And if yes, then how would you solve this problem?
Okay.
If you were, sort of part of the Super Daily team.
Got it. So I see this more as a logistics problem, not at a very front end user problem. So though this affects the user, but this is a problem which needs to be solved from a logistics point of view. So how I would approach this problem is that so I want to deliver it at the closest time to the user need, but also I have to deliver it in a more efficient and cost effective manner. So I would probably look at the demand clusters of Super Daily. I will make my transportation align in a way that like it reaches the customer from 6 to 7 at a very high level
Okay.
point of view. Like I would analyze the demand cluster and I would optimize my routing system as per the user needs.
Okay. What's the trade-off though?
Trade-off, what I feel is that the trade-off is a cost.
Okay.
So you'll be delivering more and more in that specific hour of time. You might end up putting more cost on the vehicles. You might use more vehicles.
Okay. And how would you, if you had to make a decision on whether to do this or not, how would you make that decision?
Got it. I would go back and look at the user complaints. So if I have like user complaints of milk, what percentage of milk subscription have like they reported to be like spoiled, or spoiled, or like how many users have raised a review on that. And that would be my first approach. The second approach would be like doing some user interviews on a specific set of buyers. Like the criteria of that specific set of buyers could be like who have been transacting like more, the repeat customers who have been coming back to the platform, like who have been renewing their subscriptions. So first set would be looking at the user reviews. Second way would be like taking user interviews and talking to the users.
Got it. Okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about your experience before Udaan. So you had 3 roles in a 1-year period before Udaan.
Yes.
Like why those frequent changes, and just talk to me about those 3 roles and the experience that you had in those 3 roles.
Okay, so basically, I out of those 3 roles, two were my internships.
Okay.
2 were during my MBA.
Okay.
So the first one was a 3-month internship, summer internship with QFit as one of their product intern, and second one was an optional internship which I did with Cisco.
Got it.
That was a pretty long 6-month internship as in product analytics field. Then I got into a job as a business analyst. So I switched to Udaan because I got more product facing role here.
Okay. So can you tell me about your top 2 learnings across that internship period?
Okay. So one of the first learning would be like the hard skills which I developed during the internship. So primarily I learned SQL and Excel and other analytics tools, how to use them during those internships.
Okay.
And second thing would be going out and doing multiple product competitor analysis, talking to users. So in QFit, like I spoke to multiple users of EatFit to understand their nutritional needs and to understand their food preferences. So that kind of like gave me an exposure to go and talk to the users, do user interviews, and also come back, do competitors research, market research about where to position the product, how are the competitors faring, etc. Yeah, these would be my top 2 learnings.
Got it. You mentioned learning about hard skills like SQL and Excel. Can you tell me about a hard problem that you've solved using Excel or SQL?
Okay, so since I said like I work primarily on the SCM side, mostly like my analysis go into like finding. So I use Excel to mostly do RCS.
Okay.
So I do RCS to find out like where the deviation has happened. Like let's say like just to give you an example. So if I have to analyze the performance of my routing engine, so I have a target and how much the routing engine has given me. So these two would be like two numbers which I would like to go deep and analyze. So using Excel, like I do the analysis of multiple cuts Is it like the engine level cut? Is it more on the people level cut, or the driver level cut, or is it like the external factors? So using various numbers like the dispatch, purely talking on the logistics side of thing, like using various numbers such as routing time, dispatch time, what was the first delivery time, last delivery time, was a route taken as per the suggestion of the routing engine, was the allocation done as per the suggestion by the routing engine, right? So these are like few metrics and data points I analyze using Excel.
Got it. Okay. Last question for me. What is your biggest strength as a product manager, and what is one thing that, if you had a magic wand, like you would want to improve or get rid of, like a weakness that you would want to get rid of?
Okay, got it. So my biggest strength, what I would say, is that problem solving and stakeholder management. So I feel that I'm like very good at managing multiple stakeholders and coming up with identifying problems and problem solving. So one thing what I would like to improve on myself is that how do I prioritize my own tasks, like multitasking. I'm not a great multitasker. I'm on a way to become a great multitasker, but yeah, one thing what I would like to improve is that multitasking and prioritizing my tasks.
Okay. And what are a couple of things that you've tried to improve your ability to multitask, or not multitask, prioritize?
Yeah, so off late, what I've been doing is that I've been using Google Tasks a lot. So that is kind of helping me to, to read. So I prioritize. So what I do is that before starting a day, like a day before in itself, before sleeping, I write down the things what I have to do and what needs to be done first, and I put them on the Google Tasks, and I add reminders to the Google Tasks. So I get reminder half an hour before the time what I've set. So that kind of helps me to get on track even if I'm lagging.
Okay. Got it. Anything else that you've done to, so doing this one day before, and then reminders, anything else that you've tried?
No, not on a no, I have not done anything more than that. I've just like I write down things, and now I'm transferring them to Google Tasks so that I keep reminders on my mobile phone.
Got it. Okay. Do you have any questions for our travel startup?
So yeah, so I should have probably like asked this first. So I missed asking this. So at what, how are we positioning our travel startup? Are we a hotel booking startup? Are we like flight booking startup? Are we only discovery platform? Are we somewhere in the place like Tripadvisor or Agoda is? So where are we trying to position ourselves? And like, yeah, I wanted to know this.
So we're a startup so in all the other types of startups that you mentioned, there is an infinite amount of choice. But in our startup, for a given city or a location in the world, we will only have 3 choices. Okay. And we will pick the best 3 choices. So that's the counter positioning that we do.
Got it. Amazing. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, Anirban. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So I think that brings us to the end of this interview. Before I share some of my observations, how do you think it went?
So it went fairly okay. I wouldn't rate my performance as good or highly good. So there were like a couple of instances where I was taken aback. Like I had to go back and think a bit, and I had to come back to you even on the topics which I knew like very well. So that came out as a bit surprise. but yeah, I kind of enjoyed the questions which you put forth to me. So let's say like you started with my pastime and you bought a product question into that. So that was something like, yeah, I had to like think twice before coming out with an answer, right? So even in my own like deck, so I approached the problem. I wanted to be as unbiased as possible when I was making a deck, but yeah, after this conversation I'll probably like go back and like find out like what are the what are the deviations on the user interviews. I tried to like improve on that. But yeah, so these were like pretty useful for me, and like I could have answered it better, but I kind of like could not come up with some good answers to that.
Okay. So I think I largely agree with what you said. Those were my observations and notes as well. One of the key things that I've seen, not just in this interview, but in past interviews as well, is the areas that we're strongest in when we face a slight curveball, right? Like, for example, the question on the football question where how would you come up with a metric to measure where the striker is, right? I'm sure if we were having a casual conversation over a beer at, or something, right? You would have answered that like immediately, and you would have come up with not just one metric, maybe 2 or 3 metrics. But because you're not expecting this question, and it's also in an area where you're strong at, I think you might have been caught slightly off guard.
Right.
So I think you did one thing well, though. In a couple of places where you were caught off guard, you asked for some time to think about the question. Maybe you want to figure out a way to, realize that, okay, this is a question where I might be, and then ask for time and then figure out what to do with that time. So definitely with you on the observation on those questions. I think another thing that you could actually do a lot better is I'll give you examples first, then I'll tell the feedback.
Sure.
So right at the beginning, I asked you what was your role on a day-to-day basis. So the first 3-4 things that you said was it's about SCM, it's about problem solving, it's about increasing the some metric you said. But the question that I'd asked was basically what was your role about on a day-to-day basis? And then you went into, okay, mornings are about stand-up, second half is about problem solving and what can be done, analysis, and then at the end you have calls, right? I think you could have added a lot more examples and details. And because it was a follow-up, I did not actually probe into it. So you could have gone into a lot more depth of, what are the stand-ups? What role do you play in the stand-up? Are you also running the stand-up or not? On the second half where you're actually solving problems and, uh, 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 analyzing root causes, right? That was the second thing that you mentioned. So you could have given examples of, like yesterday, this is the problem that I solved, or you could have spoken about, in that time period, here is how I prioritize between which tasks to get done or not. So I think you could have added those examples there. And similarly, at the end of the day, you said you have calls, but what are these calls about? Are these, calls where you're checking in on the progress of your product? Are these calls where all the questions that might have come during the day, you're actually setting up that call to explain those to the team of engineers, designers, etc., that might be working with you? So I think you would have spoken about that. So, and this came up in multiple places. So I'll just look through my notes. The system design one, for example, right? This was another place where you got really uncomfortable. So when I asked you, okay, what other trade-offs could you make? You mentioned bot latency, which I think was a great point. But then when I asked you, how would you mitigate that trade-off? You just said that it was going to be about system design, and you're not going to go into detail. And then the next thing you said was, okay, there are load balancers and stuff, and then you just stopped. So that part as well, right? So system design, yes, but it's too generic and too high level.
Okay.
So maybe you could have just said that, okay, I'm going to maybe deploy the bot on the client side instead of keeping the logic on the server side. I'm just making up an example. Or you could have said that, I'm going to make sure that my load balancing is absolutely perfect, because that might actually cause some amount of latency. So I was not really asking you for, because there was not enough information about how the implementation was done in the first place. So I was not really asking you about, I was just trying to see how you would approach the problem. And then you said system. So I think this is one of the other areas of feedback where anytime you say something which is abstract, you need to be able to follow up with at least one or two concrete examples.
Got it.
I'll look through this. Like even for example, the hobby, right? Example about football. You mentioned the philosophy that Arsenal as a team has had, and you spoke about one aspect of the philosophy, which was sticking with, their coach, their players, and sticking to that, right? But the initial response that you gave was, I believe in the philosophy of this club, without necessarily articulating what the philosophy is and what part of the philosophy actually appeals to you. So three examples, but one of the top things that you need to focus on is whenever you're talking about something abstract, you need to follow it up with something more concrete in the form of examples, or breaking it down into, why it is important to you. Okay. Then let's go into few specific things on the quality of reviews. Yeah. So when we spoke about the Tripadvisor part of it, the first thing that we spoke about was, my question was, we have 1 billion reviews, and why do you need more reviews? And then you spoke about the quality of reviews. But in the latter parts of the conversation, right, that connection to the quality of reviews and how your solution would improve the quality of reviews, I don't think that came out very strongly or too well. So a few examples. When I asked you about at the end, when we would either go via an edit review flow or re-trigger the bot flow, right? You mentioned that, you're leaning towards going down the edit flow and not the bot flow. But why is that option better when it comes to the objective of driving better quality of reviews? That piece was completely missing.
Okay.
And you spoke about, why for new users it might be a more familiar thing. You spoke about some of those things, but it was not clear on why the bot solution, or not even the bot solution, within the bot solution, when things go wrong, going down the bot trigger or going down the edit flow, right? What would be better in terms of quality? I think that aspect did not come out very well. Then I think the other parts you answered well, where you spoke about what the solution was. You also mentioned how you would make the trade-off on the quality of reviews. Identifying which user to show the bot prompt to. You spoke about how new users were definitely not like a good candidate, because you don't have enough information to actually decide. So I think that was done well. Repeat visitors though, it was not. So you spoke about, okay, whether they have previous searches or not, using that as an input parameter, but it was not very clear on how you would, like, here are the 3 signals I'm going to use in order to identify whether to show this bot or not. It did not have that type of clarity. I'm using this as an example. So you spoke about, okay, like, may not be able to identify, even if they came to bots, it may not be relevant. So you spoke about a lot of these terms, right? And this again comes back to that feedback. So relevance of the content is an abstract term, but how do you actually measure relevance? That level of depth and that level of discussion we could not get into. Then we spoke about the 3 jobs. You answered that fairly well. So that was intended to be, by the way, a question that was intended to, again, throw you off guard. But I think you answered that pretty well. You said it was your internships. You mentioned hard skills. Hard skills, again, the Excel question that I asked you, right? My specific question was, what's a hard problem that you solved using Excel or SQL?
Okay.
Your answer to that question was a list of all the metrics that you look at on a day-to-day basis. So you spoke about, how you use it for RCAs. Again, abstract. Concrete would have been, 3 weeks back, I had this particular RCA to do. Here are the things that I did, and here is how I found the root cause. So that would be specific. I hope you get the
Yeah,
distinction that
yes.
I'm trying to make. Grocery super daily, we spent some time speaking about. You spoke about your own problem, which was good. Logistics problem and not a user problem. So that statement, I'm not sure whether you want to phrase it like that or not, because ultimately everything is possibly a user problem. The way to solve the problem is it's a logistic solution or a route optimization, supply chain solution that you would use, right?
I probably like misphrased my words here. So I wanted to convey that it would be possible to solve using a logistic solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of misphrased the my words.
Just the not a user problem, right? That just sounds very jarring because it ultimately it is a user problem.
Yes.
Okay. Then I think you answered this quite well. So you said that it's closest to the user need. You need to look at demand clusters at 6 to 7 p.m. Then when I asked you about the trade-off, right? You mentioned that the trade-off was cost, and again, cost is a high-level thing. It's basically the demand supply gap that you're trying to match, right? And we could have, again, you could have gone a lot more deep into it and spoken about, how, let's say in a particular geography, you've got, if you were to do this, you'll need to, increase your supply by 5x, which I think you had mentioned. But cost is like ultimately everything's about cost, right? Or about revenue. So I think some amount of depth here could have been. And then when I asked you, how would you look at the trade-offs? I think again, there you got a little bit sidetracked. So one way to say that you could look at the trade-off is I'm going to look at my complaints and see whether they're gone down or not. And on the second side, I'm going to look at the additional cost. You could have said that, but you mentioned that, okay, I'm going to look at user complaints about spoiled, and then you just left it there. The second part of the trade-off, which is the cost or the additional supply that you need, that you did not actually mention. And then you said something about doing user interviews, but then it was not really clear on why you're doing those user interviews and why they would actually help in evaluating or making this trade-off. Strengths and weaknesses. Okay. I think the weakness part, at least you answered pretty well. You spoke about things that you're doing and how they're helping as well. So I think that part was good. On the strength, you said problem solving and managing multiple stakeholders. And I think you spoke about, how you're good at those. Maybe you could have added a few more lines on, how your journey has been in order to, like, how have you become good, or, what are things that have helped you become good at these strengths? Maybe you could have added those questions. So these types of questions you should ideally try and prepare beforehand and have very, again, concrete examples. Yeah. So I think that's my feedback. And I'll share these notes with you if you want. I have like 8 pages of notes. I can share these with you.
Will be very, very helpful if you could like share it with me. Yes.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Kaushik. I hope this was a great Sunday morning, even though it feels a bit of a grill and a drill. Thank you so much for joining in. We really, really appreciate. We'll make sure that you do get all these pointers and takeaways, reached out to you personally also. And on that note, folks, I know we've been waiting to sort of get started with a bunch of questions that are already on your mind. So, Anirban, are we open to taking some questions now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So let's check what questions do we have in the chat. All right, folks. Do you have any questions? You can start putting them into the chat. And while you do that, we're going to quickly run a poll, because at Next Leap, we believe a lot of feedback helps us improve this. We intend to do this every Sunday, but we would love to hear from you. How did you find it? And if it brought any value to you. So be the judge out here. You've attended these last 60 minutes. Tell us, what do you think about this session? And once you're done with polling in, you can also let us know your questions that Anirban can share with us. Anirban, we have a question which has come in. from Shubham. He says, what kind of question should we ask to the interviewer in the end?
So hard to answer that, but any sort of question and is good. So it can be about the product, it can be about the role, it could be about the company, it could be about the person who's interviewing, and in reference to their company or their role. But asking these questions, I think, is much better than not asking the question or asking just one question. The other thing is, you should also ideally be prepared with these questions. So have like 6 or 7 questions when you're researching about the role, so that based on how the interview goes, you can pick the question that might be most relevant to the interview that has just happened.
Fantastic. Also, Anirban, on that note, right? Any tips from you on how to typically start the interview or end the interview when you are the interviewee? What sort of creates a good first impression? What creates a good last impression, irrespective of how the entire session has been?
As the interviewee?
That's right.
So I think there are certain types of questions where the interviewee has more opportunities to make a positive impact. So these typically are questions like, tell me about yourself and walk me through your CV, or how's this week been, right? These are the kind of questions where the interviewer is trying to sort of break the ice or get the conversation started. And being prepared for these questions is, I think, the way to actually get that confidence or get that momentum. So if how's this week been, if you already have like the 2 or 3 things that have gone well in this week, if you already have that prepared, then you just say those, and and then you can also prime the interviewer. If you've had something really interesting and cool that's happened this week, then you can actually talk about that and then expect a follow-up on that, and that leads to more momentum. And so I think the way to tackle this particular problem of momentum and confidence is to have these questions prepared. Ideally, they're interesting or relevant to the conversation that you're going to have, and that just keeps building.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you said that, because I remember when we were when I was going through interviews, one of the tips that was given to us was always think of this as a conversation and not as a grill. Firstly, I think that just sort of breaks the ice. And the second thing that I remember that has always worked in my case, and you just mentioned that, is sort of don't just wait for the interviewer to lead the conversations, but prime them, drop those words that you want the conversation to be steered towards. So it sort of really helps the entire process, but totally hear you on this one. Folks, keep giving in your feedbacks. We're going to close the poll in about 30 seconds. It's important for us to be able to make this a better experience for you. I'm going to take the next question. Anuj has a question. What are the questions that you would expect when switching for a role within a company itself?
So I think differences, similarities between the 2 roles in the company, that's one that could possibly come up. The reasons or motivations to actually switch, that's definitely something that you could possibly expect. Skills, projects, experiences from the previous role, especially the ones that might be relevant to the current role, that those are also questions that you should probably expect.
Lovely. Let's see. We have some very interesting questions. So Vineet has an interesting question. He says, how to answer if you're in the last stage of the interview and the director of the company says that we're looking for an experienced guy.
And I'm assuming here that you're not experienced, right?
Vineet, if you could just clarify that question. Yes, you're not experienced.
So there are multiple ways that you could play this. One is that you could actually say that, the experiences that you've had. So the first way to do this would be that, okay, I may be relatively inexperienced in the traditional sense of the word in terms of number of years, but the quality of experiences that I've had and the relevance of those experiences to the role. So that's one path that you could choose in order to answer the question. The second path that you could choose to answer the question is saying that, I learn very fast because the first time that I do something, I gain the maximum out of it. And that makes up for my lack of experience because these are all new things that I'm going to do. So that's the second way that you could possibly answer the question. The third way that you could answer the question is, I don't know how it will be perceived. So that's a judgment call that you need to take at the moment, is then why did you like bring me all the way till here? We could have just done this earlier, and then follow it up with one or two of those things. Now, these are tricky, these are judgment calls that need to be made based on, how well you think the interview has gone till then, your equation with the person who's actually interviewing you. So all of those factors come into play, but you could take these three different approaches for such a question.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing that I would also like to add is, as an interview, it's always great if you can get a heads up on who are you going to be interviewed by. So you have some context on that individual. It sort of just sets you up for more conversations like these. On that note, I think this is a very interesting question. And Anirban, you and I discussed this just before we went live, in fact, this morning, is how important is the question about your favorite hobby? What does the interviewer really seek when they say, hey, tell us something about your hobbies?
So I can't speak about like the general interviewer pool, but I'll tell you why I use that question. So the first reason is that because it's a domain or an area that ideally the candidate is familiar with and also enjoys, there is a lot of material that can actually, a lot of good conversation material that can actually come out of it. So that's the first reason. The second reason is the thing that I typically evaluate when people are speaking about their hobbies is depth. So if someone says that, football is their hobby, then I am not necessarily a person who knows about football. It's not my hobby, right? But I will have a certain amount of understanding about the hobby. And as we go through the conversation, you can pretty much figure out how deep are they just saying that, okay, football is their hobby or something else is their hobby, or do they genuinely actually know about that hobby and have thought about that hobby deeply or not. So that's the reason to ask the question about hobby. But again, I've been using this question for the last 6 to 9 months, but it's been, I think, reasonably successful at finding whether the person is deep enough or not in that area.
All right. So you're essentially looking out for folks who are willing to go all out there for things that really interest them and they're passionate about. And I think it's indicative of how you're sort of doing this. Though, yes, it can be a tricky question. Disha, Shubham, I hope that answers your question. Shubham had an interesting question, in fact, Anirban. How to rise back up if we go blank during a question, and even after asking for some time to sort of come back but not be able to come up with an answer. So, how do you sort of solve for that?
I think saying, I don't know, and moving on is perhaps the best way to do this. And I'll tell you why. So if you just analyze maybe mock interviews that NextLeap has done as well, right? And just do a text search for times that someone said, I don't know, you will find that number or that percentage to be maybe sub 2%. And because it's so rare, as an interviewer, you hear someone saying that, okay, I don't know, it could act as a positive. So that would be my suggestion, Shubham, to say that, I don't know, or it could even be like, I can't think of an answer right now. Here are the things that I thought of. These probably don't make sense. So I can't think of an answer right now.
Fair enough. I think humanizing your own self and sharing your vulnerabilities in that moment just makes it a more real interview and a conversation. But at the same time, do cover up saying, okay, I'm not aware of it right now, but I think this is something which I would want to look into, maybe. Yeah. Maybe go that extra mile, post the interview, find out information, try and drop an email to the interviewer saying, hey, this is the question you asked. I did not know then, but now I know. Does this make sense?
That's a really good point as well. Yes, you can even say that I'm going to learn, because that will show commitment, saying that, this person is willing to get back in 2 hours.
Absolutely. And I think it just shows that you close the loops. there is this whole sense of commitment out there. And I think those are factors which any interviewer would look for. All right. So Shubham, I hope that answers your question too. Let's see. Okay, there's a very interesting question here is Gaurav says how to answer a question. How would you improve a product?
I'm not able to think of. Okay. So Gaurav, if your favorite product is WhatsApp and you actually can't think of any way to improve WhatsApp, then do not say your favorite product is WhatsApp in the interview, and say some other product where you can think of a way to improve that. The second part of it is if you spend enough time in WhatsApp, at least for n equal to 1 user I'm sure you will be able to come up with some way to improve WhatsApp, which is why there still is a engineering and a product team at WhatsApp, right? Because they're constantly thinking of ways to make it better.
Lovely. So Gaurav, Teja, and Bala, I hope this also answers your question because it was on the same lines of your favorite product. So I think these are also the kind of questions that one can prepare beforehand. It's like having your own playbook, that if I'm asked about my hobby or I'm asked about my favorite product or that one product I would never want to use, a bunch of these questions, right? These could actually be prepared beforehand also. Disha, to your question, I do understand where you're coming from. And this was something, it's like a counter argument, Anirban, if you want to probably talk about it also.
So great. So Disha, even this, right? I am looking for depth, but let's say you don't have that depth, or your response to this is that, I just do it because I find joy in it. I've not really thought about it. That's also leading the conversation somewhere. So I could ask you, why do you find joy about singing as opposed to, other things that you do? And you see, right, the level of the conversation keeps moving forward. So some response, it does not necessarily need to be a response that is in line with my expectation, but it just needs to move the conversation forward. Like, for example, your response to the singing hobby, right? I could ask, do you like singing a certain type of song as opposed to the other type of song? And then we could carry the conversation forward into, why this type of song versus the other type of song. So that's typically, depth just means that the level of the conversation keeps going one level deeper and deeper and deeper, Disha.
And often, Anirban, with hobbies, it does not necessarily have to be technical depth, right? It could just
be anything.
A hobby is ephemeral at the end of the day. It's a lot of what you vibe around it. One last question, Anirban, and I think it's very, very important. So, while you've been interviewing Kaushik today, he comes with some experience, and that's why you had a bunch of questions around his former past experiences. But for a lot of our audience today and a lot of our learners, it's the first role that they're going to break into. At most, they've had some internship experience, some project experience. What do you think, should be they take when someone says, hey, why you for the role? Or how do you go about answering even the internship experience that they asked about? How should they sort of say, hey, this is the value that I brought into my internship, or this is the value that I absorbed from it, and that's why I'm a good hire today, even though I don't come with any formal work experience?
So I think it depends on exactly what you said, right? What did you actually do in those internship, college project, professional experience, all of that? So what did you actually do in those experiences? What did you learn from those experiences? And how do you think you can apply those learnings into the role that is being spoken about? I think these are the three things that are being evaluated during the interview. The difference is that if someone's got more experience, then the answer or the responses from them is judged at maybe a different bar compared to, but otherwise it's about, interviews are about these three things. So doesn't matter if you don't have any experience or any professional experience, to be more precise.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And folks, if there are any more questions, we're going to take one last question. So any question, we're looking out for that now. And thank you so much for joining in on a Sunday morning. We're looking forward to continuing this every Sunday on the Next Leap YouTube channel and on our Zoom accounts also. We look forward to sort of seeing you again If you are a Next Leap top fellow, feel free to reach out to the community team to be in the hot seat and be interviewed by Anirban. We're going to try and create different case scenarios, different interview scenarios, simulated experiences, so that each and every one of you, has a lot more to learn. Let me also just remind you that today Kaushik and Anirban did not represent any organization. This was a simulated mock interview experience. Absolutely 100%. And Anirban, thank you so much. From being in the class to the instructor to doing these interview series with us, really, really appreciate for making time out today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to Kaushik. He was really good sport and, took a lot of constructive feedback really well. So thanks, Kaushik.
Thanks, Anirban. It was very useful interview. Like the feedback, the level of feedback what you gave was very valuable. I don't think in the real interview world, the interviewee gets so much feedback from the interviewer or HR. So I think this really helped me. I'll probably reach out to you or the community team to get the notes of the feedback. I'll work on that. Ritu, if you don't mind, I just have a point. Can I add? A lot of questions were there on the
Yes.
favorite product.
Yeah.
So over the last 3-4 months, I've been giving multiple interviews in the multiple real product interviews. So one definite question what I expected in most of the interviews was the favorite product interview. So to all the aspirants who are going to give interview in the future or who have calls. So what my suggestion would be as Anirban and Ritu suggested, have one favorite product, analyze the product in and out. So when Anirban asked me my favorite product to all the interviews was Super Daily, I was I knew in and out of all the Super Daily features. So one thing where you could get off guard was that the interviewer can ask you a favorite physical product, not necessarily a software product. And an interviewer can also ask you what is your favorite non-technical product. That can be as simple as a notebook or a pen or something. But my suggestion would be try to add the functionalities of the product, add why you like the product and why you would love to improve the product and what can be the features which would improve the product. Yeah. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Awesome. That was actually quite helpful. Anirban, any thoughts on that one?
No, I think completely agree with what he said. Being prepared is the best way to actually tackle these types of questions.
Awesome. On that note, thank you so much for joining in. We will see you soon. Keep an eye on all the announcements from Next Leap on across our social media platforms and your emails for the next masterclass on cracking product interviews with Anirban. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.